Good evening, ladies and germs. It has been quite a long time since we've had a video in this little setup. So, for today, I wanted to talk about the Enneagram. You're like, now, Wilhelm, you already made a video on the Enneagram. I know, but that was for the general, more so, population. I work in mental health, and I like to make videos of mental health to help out every person, not just people in the ADHD community. But the Enneagram can certainly improve and help out the quality of life of an individual with ADHD. So, what inspired me to make this video? Once I learned my Enneagram number, and once I found out what difficulties I had with my Enneagram number, along with my ADHD, which I discovered in myself when I was in my mid-20s. Knowing your characteristics and your pros and cons in life is really helpful, because when you have ADHD, life can be very, very difficult. So, we have a lot of bad habits, and we have a lot of coping habits that we pick up along the way over the years due to a lot of us not being diagnosed earlier on in life. So, how do we learn what our drives, our inspirations, and our fears and our bad habits, both behavior-wise and thought-wise? How do we learn that stuff? I'm here to tell you, if you want to find that out, you've come to the right video and you've come to the right place, because that's exactly what we're going to do today. So, if you have not discovered what your Enneagram number is, get your keister on over to the bottom side of this video in the link section below. Click the link with the Enneagram test that's labeled, and go and take that Enneagram test. Take it 2 or 3 times to make sure you got the right number, because you want to be sure. This is going to be really helpful information, and I'll be waiting right here when you get back. Alright, now that you're back and you know your Enneagram number, hopefully you're on the right video, because there are multiple videos of this. Every video will include 3 Enneagram numbers. So, a quick little recap on the Enneagram. As you can see from the picture above, there are 9 numbers. Now, next to each number is known as their wing. So, for example, we look at the Enneagram 2, for example. Right next to it, there's an Enneagram 1, and there's an Enneagram 3. So, those 3 numbers are radically different from one another, but also have a lot of things in common. So, some things might overlap. You might have characteristics of the numbers next to you. So, if an Enneagram 2, for instance, which is nicknamed the Helper, likes to help people out and do, good deeds and etc., they might be more inclined towards being the Enneagram 1, which Enneagram 1, part of the gut triad, the body triad. They like to do what's good, or what they see as proper and prim in life. They usually grew up in really strict homes, so they like to do what is right, at least in their minds. And the Enneagram 3, rather, is an achievement-based heart triad. They like to accomplish goals, and they like to be admired for the goals that they accomplish usually, especially with those that they care about. So, if the Enneagram 2 is more willing to do deeds that are just for the good-natured intention of it, more than likely going to have a strong 1 wing. If the Enneagram 2 is more oriented towards getting goals done for the sake of being viewed upon as successful, particularly, probably a stronger 3 wing. So, things differ. These Enneagram numbers, just because you got that number doesn't mean you're going to be exactly the same as another Enneagram number. There are millions of iterations of these Enneagram numbers amongst people, because we are unique and beautiful, ladies and germs, in case you haven't noticed. So, we also have, for the last part of this, we have our stress wing, and then we have our growth wing. So we'll go back to the Enneagram 2, that lovely helper, the Enneagram 2. When the Enneagram 2 is doing pretty bad, for instance, when they have been doing favors for everybody and their grandmother, but have been neglecting themselves, the Enneagram 2 has a tendency to break furniture, or especially punch holes in walls, I've noticed, working with Enneagram 2s. That's because that's a lot of built-up resentment of not speaking up for themselves. So they're like, what, no one's speaking up for me? I'm gonna give up! Boom, and you punch the wall, you make a hole, and then things get intense, and people are like, why did he or she do that? It's because the Enneagram 2 sometimes doesn't speak up for themselves, because they like to help others a little more than themselves sometimes. So what does that mean? The Enneagram 2, when they're stressed, they become the Enneagram 8. That's their stress crossover arrow. By the way, these numbers have a tendency to all kind of cross over in some kind of way with each other. So, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And what triad they cross over to differs. So, now that we know a little bit about the Enneagram, let's dive on into the nitty gritty. But before we do that, after you watch this video, if you want to dive a little more into the Enneagram and much more deep analysis of the Enneagram, I have a video of that as well. There's a link to the playlist above if you want to check that out. But for those of us who know our Enneagram number and want to see how ADHD really can impact our lives and how to catch our unconscious thoughts and negative behaviors and how to help ourselves out, then stay tuned, because this video is going to do just that. Have an open mind, have an open heart. The more of an open mind that you have, the more willingness you are to work on yourself, the better you are going to improve in the quality of your life. So I urge you, stick around. We're about to do some really good deep dive into the mind of those of us with ADHD. Let's give it a shot. So for today, for the first Enneagram number, we're going to talk about the Enneagram 1 and how that correlates to ADHD and how ADHD impacts the life of an Enneagram 1. So if you know someone who is an Enneagram 1, a family member, a colleague, or a friend, or if you yourself are an Enneagram 1, please listen closely. Enneagram 1s, something I've noticed working with Enneagram 1s is that there is an anxiousness to be perfect. And that when the Enneagram 1 feels that they're not perfect or that they're not fulfilling what they need to do, that they sometimes feel the need to lie otherwise. Or they micromanage their plans to make sure that everything falls in line accordingly. At least that's what they feel needs to happen. A lot of Enneagram 1s have expressed that if things don't go according to how they planned them, that they have a big sense of anxiety, because a lot of Enneagram 1s grow up in homes where their parents, whether it be both parents or one parent, expect them to complete a long list of tasks and chores and have their responsibilities on check, but sometimes to such a strict extent that this builds anxiety in the individual that goes on to their adolescence and onto their adulthood, where they feel that, hey, I can't really change my plans. I can't sometimes say no to people or things. And there's an anxiousness to not say no and to come off, or to at least try to come off, as ideal or perfect in other people's eyes. And the Enneagram 1 has a tendency to do this around loved ones and close friends and family members. And might not always do this around other people, but nonetheless, it can also happen. So we have to be careful because of that. Because having ADHD, we know we are not perfect. And what we have to do is we have to discuss that with those close to us, those that are at least willing to hear us out about the ADHD. So if you're someone who gets anxious, feeling a need to be perfect a lot of the time, learn to allow yourself to not be perfect, to not be ideal. I know that sounds weird, that sounds intense, that might sound really hard, but we cannot micromanage, plan everything that we do. Life is really unpredictable. The sooner that we get a grasp on knowing how to modify our plans and how to better go with the flow and how to let things just happen sometimes, it's going to really help out our mental state. It's going to really help out our mental health, and it's going to help out the quality of our life, and it's going to help those around us that are sometimes close to us. Because you'd be surprised, a lot of people want you to be much more relaxed and at ease than you probably sometimes feel. The next point is, there's a difficulty with accountability. Sometimes the Enneagram 1 has a lot of intense negative memories of being scolded or reprimanded by one of their parents or their teachers growing up, where if they did something incorrect, and sometimes to a slight extent, they were perhaps punished, yelled at, or degraded a lot of the time. And so because of this, the Enneagram 1 sometimes has a very big difficulty with accountability or being critiqued because it feels really hurtful and really intense. And when we have ADHD, we have something known as rejection-sensitive dysphoria. This makes the rejection and the critique and the accountability discussion for the Enneagram 1 really difficult because they feel that pain and that shame and that hurt that they felt in their childhood sometimes by their parents or their teachers or whomever it was that hurt them. And that feeling comes back. And I probably wonder, how do we stop that feeling from coming back? Well, that's where we have to heal our trauma and our pain that we carry with us sometimes. And some people don't know how to do that. What it takes is you have to go back to those years when you were younger and reflect upon what was done to you. You have to see all sides of the story. You have to see what you did correctly, what you did wrong, what the other person did right, what they did wrong, what could have been done better. And most of all, you need to cut yourself some slack. Because again, you're not perfect. And having ADHD and trying to come off as ideal all the time is gonna drive you insane. You need to be okay with saying, I can't do something. I'm not perfect. I'm not ideal. And guess what? Sometimes you're not going to be able to help out. And that's perfectly normal. It's not your place to always be the one, to be the helper, to be the one that fixes stuff. It's not your responsibility. And if you felt like that as a kid and you're not a kid anymore, well, it takes a matter of getting used to. And for some Enneagram 1s, their parents aren't even alive anymore. And they still feel that sense of my mom, my dad, or whomever, my caretaker is gonna come and is gonna reprimand me or scold me for the wrong that I'm doing right now. Or they're gonna make me feel really harsh, and a lot of the time that's not true. It's just the continuous trauma we keep with us because we avoid reflecting and thinking about these things that happen to us. And for some people, the trauma is so intense that at that point, look for your local therapist or local counselor, one that can work with you to help you heal through that trauma, because a lot of Enneagram 1s do have trauma. And it's unfortunate because they have a good heart and just want to help out, but they carry this intense anxiety with them. The next point would be hyper-focusing on the inner critic. Now, the Enneagram 1, much like the other gut triads, the Enneagram 9 and the Enneagram 8, the Enneagram 1 has this inner critic that is constantly critiquing the activities that they do. A lot of Enneagram 1s have reported. Now, this inner critic, when you have ADHD, you're going to be hyper-focusing on that inner critic. And that inner critic is going to be nitpicking and just telling you that you need to do this, you need to do that. Oh, look at you again. You messed up. You messed up. You're not enough. What would mother say? What would father say? And it's really, really overworking on the mind. And it's really, really a big hassle on people that have to go through with that, where they can't shut the inner critic up. The best thing you can do when your inner critic is going intense on you is you have to question your inner critic. You have to set a boundary within yourself. Did I really mess up? Could I have done better? Are there other people that didn't come through? You have to cut yourself some slack and see that, hey, again, you have a condition that you perhaps are not taking care of. You have a condition, ADHD, that other people don't have. That's why they don't have difficulty doing certain things, but you do. So if you feel like your inner critic is making you compare yourself to other people, tell your inner critic to shut the hell up. Your inner critic does not drive you. You are in charge of it. And if a lot of time in your life has been spent with you listening to your inner critic, you have to start questioning your thoughts. You have to do a thought stop and be like, is this legitimate? Do I deserve to be putting myself down this much? Or did I do enough of what was needed? Tell yourself, I've done enough. I have done my part for today. And if the goal was not completed, or if the thing wasn't improved, that's okay. You did your part. And that is good enough. The next point would be
major difficulty with change / the unexpected. A lot of Enneagram 1s, due to that micromanaging that we mentioned earlier, have a constant need or a constant fear that drives them to not change plans, to not change standards that they have set for others and themselves sometimes. Let me tell you something. I know that change can be a little scary, especially when you have ADHD and you feel that things are going to go awry or just go outright intense if we don't stick to the plan. A lot of the time, due to the circumstance or other people, we have to change the plan. And something difficult for the Enneagram 1 might be changing plans because of something of theirs, a need of theirs. Let me tell you something. You are important enough to be the cause of a change of plans for your friends and your family members. Again, if they're not used to you doing that, it's gonna take them perhaps a little while to get used to it. But guess what? You and your mental health are totally worth it. So you make those people wait, regardless of whether they want to or not. It doesn't matter. You matter. So do yourself a favor. Become accustomed with changing plans. It doesn't mean you have to always flake on people. Let your word mean something, but let your mental health and your self-care also mean something. Become comfortable with change, because sometimes we need to modify in life, and that makes life less stressful, and things are gonna be okay. The following point would be building a wall to not let anybody in. Some Enneagram 1s have grown up in a home where they feel like they have not been able to express themselves because they would be reprimanded, yelled at, or punished if they said too much of something. So because of that comes a need where we feel like we cannot express how we really feel or who we really are. And when you have ADHD, you have a lot of thoughts and a lot of emotions running through your head. We have to be careful. Who we open up to, who we allow into our lives is a privilege. At the same time though, we cannot hold back from who we really are. You're gonna build up a lot of resentment as an Enneagram 1. If you build up a wall and you don't let people in, if you don't allow yourself to say how you really feel or what you really need, you are gonna build up a lot of resentment, and then you're gonna start saying really condescending things to people when you're stressed out if you haven't done so already. So we have to be careful because of that. We have to communicate our needs, communicate our desires, communicate when we need help or when we're exhausted. If we don't do that, if we build a wall around how we're really feeling and what's going on the inside, no one's gonna know to help you out, and that's gonna make you feel bad. You're gonna ask yourself, how come people don't wanna help me out? What did I do wrong? Am I not deserving? Then comes that inner conflict that you have within yourself. What helps that out is allowing those that are worthy of hearing you out, hear you out. And if you haven't done that in your life, I urge you now to start thinking of someone that you can trust, that you can do that with. And don't tell me, oh, there's no one, they're all gonna, no. You have to choose someone. You do have someone in your life. And if you feel like you don't, choose someone you feel might be the most understanding and explain these things to them. Because again, I'm letting you know, you are worth all of that. And your mental health and self-care is worth all of that. Don't build a wall. Allow those that are worthy enough to enter your inner world. The next point, there's a sense of controlling and condescendingness that comes from some Enneagram 1s. Again, this comes perhaps from Enneagram 1s that grew up in a really strict home where their parents were really controlling over them and perhaps used condescending remarks to degrade them or make them feel bad. Enneagram 1s that grew up in homes where the parents were condescending to them perhaps are going to be condescending to other people and just bring them down, and sometimes might not even be aware of it. This comes from repression and from an unconscious notion of wounds, of hurt that has not been dealt with or not been reflected upon. A lot of Enneagram 1s hold resentment unconsciously towards one or both of their parents because of feeling like, I was overworked, I deserved a break. And let me tell you something, you damn right you deserved a break. Especially having ADHD, you deserved more than a break. You deserved help. And this is one of the main reasons why this video is being made. So you learn more about yourself, and you learn what you're like when you're not healthy, and you learn what you can perhaps start doing in order to help yourself out. Another point would be feeling like everybody depends on you. a lot of Enneagram 1s feel like they have to take care of business in get-togethers or in events, and that it all depends on them, and that if things don't go well, it's their fault. I'm here to tell you that's not true. That comes from an upbringing where you were made to feel like everything depended on you. And I'm sure a lot of the times it did depend on you, but you don't have to continue that. That is stressful. If you're putting on events and you feel good when a lot of things depend on you, that's totally fine. By all means, continue to do that. But don't always do that. Don't always thrust everything on your shoulders. You're gonna build a lot of hurt and resentment onto yourself. You can ask for help. You can let others know that you feel tired, you need some assistance. You're still gonna be the same kick-ass person you were before. Don't feel like, oh, if I ask for help though, I'm gonna be looked upon as a person of honor, as a person that can come through. Let me tell you something. There is honor in being honest about what you need. There is honor in saying, I've had enough. I am tired. I am exhausted. There is honor in knowing when you are not at your best, you are not going to do your best. And now that you know that when you're exhausted and tired, that you're not going to do your best, that should be a big motivation for you to be like, you know what? I can do this later. Right now, I'm not going to do this at my best. I need to wait. I perhaps need to ask for some help. I need to get myself some self-care. I need to relax. I need to do things that make me feel happy and safe and relaxed, where I can just be me, give myself some self-care, and then I can come back to working on this. And guess what? I can also perhaps ask somebody for help. And things will work out just fine. The Enneagram 2. When it comes to ADHD, and when it comes to being an Enneagram 2, there's a lot of interesting things that can occur that can make life really difficult, that can make life feel like crap. We really have to be there for other people. But at the same time, we neglect ourselves because of that. The Enneagram 2 is nicknamed the helper out of the Enneagram numbers. So let's take a look at what happens to the Enneagram 2 when ADHD takes a hold of the Enneagram number and sometimes overworks the individual. The first point on the list is agreeing to help too many people. Double booking, triple booking, quadruple booking. Saying yes to the same group, saying yes to multiple people, yet not realizing you have agreed to help out multiple people. And then flaking on everyone because of thought paralysis. I don't know what to do. I've said yes to so many people. Who am I gonna help out now? Who is gonna hate me the least if I flake on them? The Enneagram 2 then creates that hierarchy of, okay, well, I have to say yes to these people because they matter to me the most, or because they're gonna help me out the most. So what can we do to help ourselves out with this is you don't have to agree to help everybody out. You have to utilize an app or an agenda on your phone or something so you can see what your schedule is, so you don't just flat out agree to help people out. I know it feels good to help people out. I know it feels good to help those you care about. But at the same time, you have to feel just as good helping yourself out. Because sometimes we exhaust ourselves because we agree to help too many people out. So be honest with your friends and family members and colleagues when you can't do something. Let them know you have a prior engagement, that you've agreed to help out or do something for somebody else, or that you need to do something else. People will be a lot more understanding than you feel. And for a lot of Enneagram 2s that grew up in homes with ADHD or where the family had ADHD, they sometimes got the message that if they didn't help their parents or come through for them, that all hell was going to break loose. The parent might have got really sad, really intense, upset, would have started shaming or degrading the Enneagram 2. So the Enneagram 2 to this day still feels like, well, if I say no to certain people or don't help out, I'm going to get treated just as bad as my parents treated me when I was a little kid. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. Not everybody is your parents. And not everybody's going to act like that. And if you tell people you need some self-care, some time to yourself, and they still don't want to cut you some slack, well, then at that point, you need to set a boundary for yourself. Let me tell you something. You matter. And so does your self-care and your mental health. So please stand up for yourself. It doesn't have to be in a brutal way. Just be like, I need some time to myself. I'm not at my best right now, and I really want to help out, but just not right now. And things will be okay. Next point, being out of touch with how you feel. A lot of Enneagram 2s are so in the scope of, I want to perceive how this person is feeling that I'm helping out. I want to see how these people, my friends or family members, are helping out. Or my colleagues at work or my classmates. I want to help all the other people out. But guess what? Because of doing that, we might start hyper-focusing on that. That's where the ADHD kicks in as well. We might start seeing, okay, well, like this person's my friend, so I need to do this. This person did me a favor last week or the month before, so I need to do something just as big for them. If not, they're not going to be my friend and things are going to go bad. And then boom, we just keep hyper-focusing. We keep catastrophizing how we're feeling. You need to be aware, most importantly, about how you are feeling. Are you exhausted? Do you feel any resentment doing any of these favors for other people? Do you feel forced to do these favors? If you feel forced, resentful, you more than likely are overworked and are not in touch with how you're feeling. Give yourself a break and let those you're working with know that you yourself need a little break. It doesn't have to be dramatic, it doesn't have to be intense, but you have to be aware of how you're feeling, because your feelings do matter. Just like you think other people's feelings matter, guess what? Your feelings need to matter to you just as much, if not more. It's you. Because guess what? If you're not doing good, and if you're doing lousy in your life, and if you're not taking care of yourself, the help you're going to give other people is going to be bad help. Because then you might end up hurting other people, and that's the exact opposite of what you want. So please be mindful of yourself and get in touch with how you're feeling. Don't silence that part of yourself. It's important. The next point, you go from complete silent treatment to absolute motor mouth when you're talking to certain people. You stop talking to people for a few months, classic ADHD, forget that they exist, and then all of a sudden you start talking up a storm out of nowhere and you just paragraph after paragraph in the messages, or you contact them somewhere else. We need to be careful because of that. People do not appreciate that. And that comes from the ADHD, that's sometimes out of sight, out of mind. Hey, we're friends with a group of people, or friends with an individual, and then we get a new hobby, or we start hanging out with another group of friends, and we completely forget about the previous friend that we were hanging out with, or the previous group of people we were hanging out with. So again, it's all about prioritizing our time. The Enneagram 2 is going to be vibing with whoever they're helping out with at the moment, but at the same time though, there needs to be a balance of that, especially if you're working with multiple people, because other people can gain resentment over that. And if you feel you have a really difficult time over that, I urge you to open up about your ADHD and be like, you know what, this is nothing personal. It's just that I have an issue with ADHD where if I'm not thinking of something or someone and I'm doing other things that have my mind distracted, I'm not going to be able to fully remember my other group of friends or the other things I have to do. And that's the difficulty of ADHD. So try to keep a balance of that. Utilize an agenda, utilize a notebook to keep your plans, whatever you need, notes on your phone. That way you can keep in touch with those that you need to keep in touch with, and you can stay on schedule with your work agenda and your week agenda. That way you are not disregarding people and things of importance in your life and not driving people away. Another point would be building up a strong resentment/defensiveness. Now this comes from Enneagram 2s that are very overworked, where they have felt they have gone to the moon and back, they have climbed Mount Everest and done all these things for these people that they care about, but they feel like little to nothing has been done to help them out. Now this comes when an Enneagram 2 has completely overworked themselves and gone to the moon and back for somebody else, and they're exhausted, but they're not aware of the fact that they're tired and don't feel good. Like one of the earlier points says, they're out of touch with how they feel. So when an Enneagram 2 is not feeling good and is overworked, guess what? The resentment is going to come kicking in. And then that's when the defensiveness might kick in. And the Enneagram 2 might start giving an intense attitude towards people that they're close to. That's when the Enneagram 2 goes over to its stress arrow, where it's pointed towards the Enneagram 8, So when the Enneagram 2 becomes its stress arrow and goes over to the Enneagram 8, the Enneagram 2 is going to lay the smackdown on people and things that upset them verbally. And sometimes, unfortunately, the Enneagram 2 might get really intense and start breaking some furniture. I know plenty of Enneagram 2s that have broken plenty of doors in their bedrooms, all over their houses. I don't know why the door, but the door seems to be a common thing Enneagram 2s break when their resentment builds in, when they're overworked. So be careful. You don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to hurt anybody else either. So give yourself some self-care and be realistic and be open and honest with those you work with that. You know what? I feel a little overworked. I need my space, or I feel like you haven't come through for me. But if you're feeling that, you discuss that with the person when you're feeling good. You don't go and do that when you're not feeling good, because then your RSD is going to kick in, and then you're going to start saying stuff you don't mean. So please take care of yourself. When it's time to have a serious conversation, be at your best. Don't just go impulsively when you're feeling at your worst and talk to somebody. That's the worst time you can talk to someone. The next point would be what we just discussed: punching a door, destroying furniture. When the Enneagram 2 gets so intense that they start punching doors, destroying furniture, breaking stuff, it's because they are exhausted. They have completely pushed themselves past or beyond the limit in some areas. And they don't know how else to take out that stress, because they have been letting that stress build in within themselves. So finally, when that stress is just, you can't take it anymore, boom, you gotta release it. You gotta punch a door, you gotta break something. You gotta have that cathartic release. So again, be careful, because if you're taking care of yourself, you're not gonna have the need to do that. And then the final point, as we mentioned earlier, is defensiveness. Now with this defensiveness, this can be an overlying sensation of where this defensiveness is placed in so many different arenas and areas of their life. Some Enneagram 2s can become really defensive and intense with all sorts of people: their family members, their loved ones, their co-workers, and anybody else that unfortunately gets in the way. So we need to be careful not to go brutal on people, especially people that don't deserve it. There's a way to set a boundary in a firm way, but at the same time, there's a way to overdo it too. So you got to be careful not to overdo it. If you're feeling defensiveness a lot within yourself, if people tell you something and you feel the automatic need to keep protecting yourself and then talking people down, you're stressed and you're overworked and you feel like perhaps you were being taken advantage of. When an Enneagram 2 feels like they're being taken advantage of, they can get really defensive and they can go into their fight or flight because it feels horrible. Enneagram 2 is the helper. If they feel their help is being taken advantage of, they're really going to get upset, and they might get defensive, and they might even get volatile. So we have to be careful. When we have ADHD, these triggers can be set off a lot easier. So again, I urge you, stick up for yourself. Become aware of your emotions, of how you're feeling, and don't feel that you have to promise to help out everybody around you. You can be selective as to who and when you help out. Be considerate to others, as you've been, but most importantly, be considerate to yourself and your ADHD. The Enneagram 7, the analytical, intelligent, web-brained individual that likes to have a really good time, likes to eat foods with, I want to go to this restaurant, I want to go here, I want to go there, I want to experience life, I'm amped up, but it's like, oh my God, ADHD. Oh crap, I lost track of time. The Enneagram 7 loves to enjoy life and likes to be on the go and different projects and looking forward to different things. So what we're going to discuss now is the Enneagram 7 and when they're stressed. And what are some signs to look for when the Enneagram 7 is stressed? These are signs I've noticed commonly in Enneagram 7s I worked with that have ADHD. So I wanted to share it with you guys to see if you guys can pinpoint some of these in yourselves and can see them happening in your life so you can learn how to balance yourself out and be like, man, I didn't know that's what I did when I was stressing out. Okay? Now I have a strategy of how to go about that. So we have to have an open mind for something like this. For some Enneagram 7s, the difficulty itself is doing what we're doing right now, which is discussing these things. Because it might be a little too difficult to discuss. Some Enneagram 7s use this happy-go-lucky mindset to just out-happy themselves out of situations or things because they can't handle the ugly, raw truth of certain people or certain things. That's escapism. So we will be talking about that quite shortly. So let's go to the first point. Enneagram 7, when they're stressed out. There's a strong sense of being unable to focus because the mind is just going rapid fire in different directions. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, but doesn't it happen to a lot of people with ADHD? Isn't their mind just going really quick? Yes, but when you're an Enneagram 7, with that web brain that the research has called those of Enneagram 7s have, you're able to pinpoint and connect like hundreds of thousands of points really quick. But when we're stressed out, those points and ideas and thoughts and things are going to come left, right, forward, and backward like a pinball. And you're going to be able to, not going to be able to focus. You're not going to be able to get stuff done. So when you notice that you have an inability to focus, when like you have trouble focusing more than usual, that's a clear indication that you're stressed out in your life. That you're being overworked, or you have way too many deadlines and responsibilities, or you're not getting enough self-care. So I urge you, if you're an Enneagram 7, please get yourself some self-care and learn about yourself so you don't have such an anxious inducing mind that's just going a million miles an hour. So we have to learn to slow down sometimes and be like, what's wrong with me today? Why am I acting the way I am? Have I not slept enough? Have I not eaten well? Have I not had enough self-care? Have I not had enough time for myself to do the things that I like? If the answer to any of those things is no, it's time to start working on those things. And if the answer to a lot of those things is no, then you really need to start working on those things. Because your ability to focus and to have peace of mind is going to have a lot to do with how well you have those things on check. So I urge you, help yourself out. Next point, an overconsumption of stimuli. Whether this be food, whether this be hot Cheetos, whether this be going to a million different places. I want to go here. I want to try this. I want to go to that place and I want to experience that. Then I want to go here. I want to try that. I want to try this. And it just doesn't stop. What you're doing right there is the ADHD, the lack of stimuli, the lack of dopamine and norepinephrine to get that drive and inspiration and adrenaline rush that sometimes comes with norepinephrine. You're going to try to get that from other things and other places. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with leisure time and doing these things. But if you're overdoing it, if you're overdoing consumption of eating junk food or of going to outings constantly, you might be neglecting yourself. You might be neglecting your friends, your colleagues, and your family members. And most importantly, you're more than likely neglecting the most important person in your life, you. So, if you are having difficulty with overeating, or if you're overeating junk food, or if you are making escapism, everything will be fine when I go to this place. Everything will be perfect once I try this dish or once I do this thing. That's an overconsumption of stimuli. And you're making these fantasy scenarios that once you do project A or scenario A, that everything is just magically going to be okay and correct. And then you're going to jump to the next thing to do that. And then you're not going to learn about yourself. And then the process is going to continue, and you're going to continue to hurt yourself and others around you. The best thing to do is to learn when you're overdoing things. Be aware. How do you feel when you're overstressed? How do you feel when you have the need to overconsume certain foods or to overdo going to outings? How do you feel? What behaviors do you do? How does your skin feel? What do your hands feel like? Where does your mind go? What places does your mind go to? Do you get sad? Or does your mind try to make yourself happy? It's like, nah, it's not that bad actually. The sun is smiling outside. Everything will be just fine. I'm gonna go here and everything will be just happy afterwards. If you start doing the happy-go-lucky escapism, you're never gonna learn. You have to learn about the negative parts about yourself. You have to, most importantly, become comfortable with being uncomfortable in your thoughts and notions that need to be worked on. For a lot of Enneagram 7s, they're escapers of thoughts, mindsets, and scenarios that make them feel bad. And that's a perfectly normal thing for a human being to want to avoid negative things, places, and people. But sometimes in life, we have to face these things in order to improve as people and overcome the obstacles in our life. We have to learn to conquer that of which is difficult for us in order to improve and thrive in this life. So if you're over-consuming stimuli, it's probably because you're stressed out. And if you don't know why you're stressed out or what you do when you're stressed out, I urge you to start thinking about it and write it down and start working on it. The improvement and betterment of your life and those around you depends on it. The next point, defensiveness about identity. Some Enneagram 7s, when they're really stressing, they're gonna get really defensive about who they are. Somebody might tell them, hey, you didn't do a really good job in this. And Enneagram 7's gonna be like, well, who the hell are you to tell me I didn't do a good job? I'm this and I'm that. You're just this. When we haven't slept enough, when we haven't eaten well or enough, or we've skipped the meal, we're gonna get hangry. We're gonna get intense. You guys know what I mean by hangry, right? That's when you haven't eaten and the slightest little thing is just gonna make you erupt into a ball of emotions. A lot of the time, intense emotions. So if you're feeling defensiveness about who you are, there might be something that's hurting you within yourself. Something or something that someone said or did, and you might not be aware of it because you're forcing yourself to be happy to not have to deal with it. So guess what? Resentment is gonna build and you're gonna be defensive and you're gonna be like, wow, I don't know why I'm defensive. Or I don't know why I'm so like this today. And it's because if we don't deal with the internal issues on the inside, if we don't process the negative of which happens to us and the negative behaviors that we do, I'm here to tell you, they're never gonna go away. You're gonna have them the rest of your life. So why not use the analytical nature of the Enneagram 7 mind to pinpoint these points of where the errors occur? When I'm stressed out, I have a tendency to do this, or you know what? Man, I haven't been sleeping good these last 2 days or 3 days or week or months. I need to start taking care of myself so I don't treat myself and other people like crap anymore. It takes those steps. It takes just a few steps. I urge you to please get started. The next point, randomly lashing out. I've worked with some Enneagram 7s that tell me when they are at their wits' end and stressed beyond all belief, and sometimes they arrive at that notion without even being aware that they're stressed. They just lash out and break something and shove somebody, threaten something, it's like, whoa, where did that come from? That's not me. Why did I treat this person so intensely? Or why did I go about the situation like this? Well, that's because you might have masked the thoughts and scenarios and things that annoyed you or upset you. You happy-go-luckied yourself out of them. You're like, nah, it's not really a big deal. Actually, it's fine. This person's screwing me over. No, it's all good. The sun is still shining on the outside. If you try to out-happy your thoughts, you're not gonna learn. Your body, your mind, you're gonna create resentment, and then you're gonna lash out. And you're gonna do things that are out of your nature and out of your character. It's best to learn about yourself so you can balance yourself out and let people know that, you know what, I need a little break right now. I'm not feeling my best. And that's okay. because you're deserving of that consideration. The next point, denying reality. This goes back to the points I've just been making, to happy-go-lucky yourself out of scenarios. It is positive and good to have a happy, positive, good mindset when you're trying to work on something, but not to deny the reality of what you're going through. It's okay to enter the realm of, you know what, this wasn't good. But I believe that if I put practice and initiative into what I'm doing, that I'm gonna be able to thrive in this scenario. That's being positive. In a realistic sense, you're not denying reality. You're like, this is what's really happening. And this is where I'm at right now. You know what? Let me approach this in a healthier, more realistic manner. And you'd be surprised how much you can accomplish. But it just takes that little step to being realistic with yourself and being like, you know what? This thing, it's actually made me feel a lot worse than I'd like to admit, or that I previously admitted. And that's okay. Start reflecting. Why did it feel bad? What could have I done better? What could have the other person have done better to make this scenario a better situation? Or what can we do to improve it for the next time? If we keep denying reality, we're not going to learn, and we're going to keep repeating the negative reality that we might be in right now because of the situation that some people are in right now. It's healthy. It is healthy to reflect. And it's even healthier to reflect and learn and apply the notions of what we learn. Next point, blind optimism. This has been the theme of an Enneagram 7, is like, well, everything will be just dandy if I try this dish, if I make this food, if I go to this place, if I do this thing. And sometimes, some Enneagram 7s with ADHD, they start hyper-focusing on that blind optimism, and they'll start believing their own lie, unfortunately. And some Enneagram 7s, unfortunately, throughout history have lost their life, or have succumbed to horrible scenarios, or have been manipulated by scenarios and people and things because of refusing to see the negativity and the truth behind certain things, people, and situations. So, if blind optimism is a problem of yours as a 7, start reflecting on scenarios and things that hurt you. Why did they hurt you? How long were you negatively impacted by them? Have those negative scenarios changed a part of your personality? Have they perhaps changed a part of your personality that you would like to get back? What would you like to change about yourself if possible? It's things like that. It's things like that and questions like that that can really help you grow as a person. Find out those things about yourself. Write them down. Type them out. Find resources to start working on them. You'd be surprised how much you can conquer. And the final point, frequently lying about your struggles. Some Enneagram 7s, especially with ADHD, are gonna have this anxiety of like, okay, I can't say this is hard for me. I can't say I didn't do it, so I'm going to go over the mountain, over the hills, over the rainbow to get this assignment or thing done and not let other people down. Or sometimes Enneagram 7s hide what they're not good at, and then they end up in these calamities where it's like, oh, I don't know what to do now. Actually, I'm not that good at this. I'm not as good as I thought I was. Okay, what do I do? Everything is just going bad. Oh crap, what am I gonna do? You know what? Let me plan an outing or a trip, or let me try this dish, and then everything will be just fine. Is the stress coping habit of the Enneagram 7. Rather than trying to escape and lie about your struggles, be realistic and upfront and honest about what you have difficulty with. Having ADHD has traumatized a lot of people into thinking that if they admit they have trouble with something, that they're gonna get yelled at, scolded, or be put into an anxiety-inducing scenario. That comes from our childhood, of being around a really intense, strict parent, where we felt like, man, we can't say what we have difficulty with. We can't say we've had enough, that this is too hard. We've had to push ourselves all our life, and I'm here to commend you for that and tell you you've done a good job. But you know what else needs a good job? You do. You need to do a good job at taking care of yourself so that your value, your life, and your ADHD will be well taken care of. Your life outlook and the quality of your life will improve once you start being able to process these things and to learn about yourself. Instead of trying to escape the negative feelings and negative sentiments of situations, things, and people, instead of trying to escape them by going to places or going to outings or trying different foods, the biggest thing you can do to help yourself is not do those things. And instead, reflect on what needs to be improved. Take notes, write down, meditate, practice mindfulness. Make sure to give yourself some self-care. And you know what you can do? As a little reward to yourself, when you accomplish some of these goals, take yourself out for a nice outing. Go and eat that dish or try that food place that you've been wanting to try. It creates a positive synergy of hey, it's okay to not be okay all the time. It's okay to ask for assurance and let other people know this is a little hard for me. It's okay to be comfortable with yourself and to be okay with that. So, Enneagram 7s, analytical people. Okay, a lot of good people. I've worked with a lot of 7s, some good people. There's some good people, but at the same time, they gotta work on themselves. Enneagram 7s, I urge you, work on yourself. Find out these things about yourself. They're gonna greatly help you improve the value of your life. They're gonna greatly help tame the ADHD. And they're gonna overall help you have a better value of life, a better quality of life, where your happiness is not gonna be dependent on outings or different foods or things of that nature. It's gonna be rather emanating from you, from within. The happiness comes from the self. To know the self is to conquer the self. Go out there and be the best Enneagram 7 I know you can be.